Hello, everyone. I am Jennifer McCary. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm the Chief Diversity and Belonging Officer for Bowling Green State University. Welcome and thank you for joining us virtually and in person as we celebrate this important event for Bowling Green State University, the dedication of the Robert L. Perry Veranda at Shaztel Hall. Our event today is taking place in the Demling Family Thompson Student Union because of inclement weather. Due to the global pandemic, Bowling Green State University is following all guidelines from the Center of Disease Control, the State of Ohio, Ohio Department of Health, and Wood County Health Department by wearing face coverings and completing our health checks before coming to campus. I would like to recognize the dedicated leaders and ambassadors of our university who are in attendance. When I call your name, please stand if you are able. I ask the audience to hold your applause until all have been recognized. First, the leaders and ambassadors of the university who are in attendance. BGSU Board of Trustees Chair David O'Brien, Vice Chair Marilyn Isley, current members of the board Joshua Otten, Willa Ebersol, Drew Forehand, Linda Forte, George Miller, Jeff Radbill, Richard Ross, Amy Shore, and Howard Trawl. BGSU President, that's fine. BGSU President Rodney Rogers, and BGSU Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic and Student Affairs, Dr. Joe Whitehead. I would like to acknowledge Dr. Robert L. Perry, the inaugural director of the university's Ethnic Studies program, and his family, friends who are joining us today. We are honored to recognize the legacy of Dr. Perry. Would Dr. Perry, family, and the Perry family invited guests please stand if you are able to be recognized. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce and welcome to the podium Bowling Green State University Board of Trustee Chair David O'Brien. Chair O'Brien.
Thank you, Jennifer. It is a pleasure to be here this afternoon to unveil the Robert L. Perry Veranda located at Shaztel Hall. We certainly wish we could be there on site today if it wasn't for this inclement weather, but it is Bowling Green, Ohio, so for homecoming, we have mid-July weather. Today, we have mid-November weather. Tomorrow should be mid-September, I think. So, the Board of Trustees approved this naming in May in recognition of two-time alumnus Dr. Perry, the inaugural director of the university's Ethnic Studies program. In 1997, when Dr. Perry retired, the Board of Trustees approved his title of Distinguished Professor Emeritus in special recognition of his teaching, research, and mentoring of our students. His work created a foundation for our university's educational approach to not only ethnic studies, but diversity, belonging, and inclusion. You'll hear more about this lasting legacy from Dr. Angela Nelson later in the program. As chair, our board continues to focus on this work, not only in our Diversity and Belonging Committee, but across the university. We have seen such progress in the last few years alone in the Division of Diversity and Belonging. That is possible because of university leaders such as Dr. Perry. This is more than just a naming and an unveiling of a veranda. It's another step forward in recognizing our commitment to ensuring that each member of our community can belong. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair O'Brien. It is now my privilege to introduce the 12th president of Bowling Green State University, Dr. Rodney K. Rogers. President Rogers.
Thank you, Jennifer. Today is indeed a very exciting day for Bowling Green State University as we unveil the Robert L. Perry Veranda located on Shaztel Hall. And I'll say Shaztel Hall sits at the opening of our campus, a historic opening of our campus, and this veranda will absolutely an appropriate and fitting tribute as it sits there as future students and faculty and staff enter our campus. I want to make sure that we thank our Chief Diversity and Belonging Officer, Jennifer McCary, Dr. Angela Nelson, Associate Professor and Director of the School of Cultural and Critical Studies, for their leadership in advancing this naming. As Chair O'Brien mentioned, today we are not only recognizing the work of the inaugural director of the university's Ethnic Studies program, but honoring Dr. Perry, who is a two-time alumnus of Bowling Green State University. Dr. Perry, you are a trailblazer, not just in this discipline, but in our community. And we are thrilled to have you and your family join us today for this honor. Now more than ever, we recognize the importance of diversity and belonging work that ensures that each student and each faculty member and each staff member belongs in this community. More than 50 years ago, the heart of this work can be traced back to leaders like Dr. Perry. And it's not just our core values or who we are, it's the intentionality of our curriculum, the spirit of our student programming. It's our constant effort to ensure we are attracting and retaining hardworking, diverse, and creative faculty and staff who are educating and supporting each of our students across our two campuses. It was my predecessor, President William Jerome, the sixth president, who happened to be in my spot when Dr. Perry led, with some colleagues certainly, but Dr. Perry, the key leader in creating the Department of Ethnic Studies. And today, it's one of the oldest in the nation focusing on interdisciplinary studies of race. So think of its impact. Sometimes to know where we are heading as a university, you have to recognize and understand where we have been. And Dr. Perry's work is one of those mileposts of progress in our university history. We certainly have more work to accomplish, not just in the ethnic studies academic field, but as a community. And we aspire for our university to represent what we wish for all of society. Today's naming and unveiling of the Robert L. Perry Veranda will forever be another reminder of our commitment to ethnic studies and diversity and belonging. To Dr. Perry, thank you. Thank you for your innovation, for your creativity, for your leadership, and in your belief in your alma mater. I am confident that the Department of Ethnic Studies will continue to be a leader nationally and globally, and certainly right here on our campus. I Ziggy Zumba.
Thank you, President Rogers. I would like to introduce Dr. Angela Nelson, an associate professor in the Department of Popular Culture, the director of the School of Cultural and Critical Studies, and chair and graduate coordinator of the Department of Ethnic Studies. Dr. Nelson.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you all for attending our ceremony today. It is my pleasure to make a few remarks. I am grateful for the Board of Trustees, President Rodney Rogers, Chief Diversity and Belonging Officer Jennifer McCary, Dr. Ravi Perry, and the Perry family, and to all those who made this dedication ceremony a reality. Thank you. In 1970, a Black Studies Committee organized amid vigorous student protests at Bowling Green State University won approval for the founding of an Ethnic Studies Center and the appointment of its director, Dr. Robert L. Perry, making BGSU one of the first Midwestern educational institutions to have such a program of study. In 1972, the Ethnic Studies Center became an Ethnic Studies program with approval of its first major and minor in Afro-American Studies. In 1974, the program's major in Afro-American Studies formally changed its name to the major in Ethnic Studies. 4 years later, the program successfully petitioned the university for department status, and in spring 1979, departmental status was granted. Spring semester 2020 marked the 50th anniversary of the Ethnic Studies program at BGSU. A conference in conjunction with the Association of Ethnic Studies annual conference scheduled on November 5th and 6th will celebrate this historic moment. Registered conference participants have the options of attending the conference in person or virtually. Now, the Ethnic Studies Department is part of the School of Cultural and Critical Studies. The School of Cultural and Critical Studies combines the American Culture Studies program, the Department of Ethnic Studies, the Department of Popular Culture, and the Women's, Gender, and Sexuality Studies program. The Interdisciplinary School of Cultural and Critical Studies contributes to the public good through our teaching, research, service, and leadership relating to equity, diversity, and inclusion. Using a multidisciplinary approach, students engage in critical and cultural analysis, fostering media literacy and an understanding of how cultural, national, economic, racial, gender, and sexual differences are constructed and expressed. This approach prepares students to engage with broad constituencies and to create a more just and equitable world. The vision, commitment, and leadership of Dr. Perry and the founding faculty of the Ethnic Studies Department provided a strong academic platform for the development of this school. In closing, I give honor to the current faculty of the Ethnic Studies Department for their continuing work in the discipline. I honor past faculty of the Ethnic Studies Center, Ethnic Studies Program, and Ethnic Studies Department for their participation in advancing the discipline. I honor members of the Black Student Union who believed in and insisted on change. Their courageous actions opened doors for inclusivity and helped to make BGSU an even better place to learn. I honor Dr. John Scott for his leadership and courage to move forward with this concept. And finally, I honor Dr. Robert L. Perry for his leadership of the Ethnic Studies Center, Ethnic Studies Program, and Ethnic Studies Department. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. Dr. Robert Perry is Professor Emeritus in the Department of Ethnic Studies and is a Bowling Green State University alumnus, as you've heard, graduating with a BA in 1959 and an MA in 1965. Dr. Perry was the founding director of the Ethnic Studies program from 1970 to 1979 and the first department chair, as you've heard, from 1979 to 1997. Dr. John Scott, who you just heard about, chaired the search leading to the hiring of Dr. Robert L. Perry. And at this time, the stated purpose of the program was to provide multicultural education and to improve the racial balance of the university course offerings. For Dr. Perry, his job had a personal as well as a professional appeal. He enjoyed emphasizing Black history, literature, music, and philosophy, and he also wanted to establish a more diverse curriculum where students could learn to appreciate the richness of many cultures. Among his other vast accomplishments, in 1992, Dr. Perry helped establish the university's Cultural and Diversity in the United States requirement, profiled in the Chronicle of Higher Education as the first of its kind at the university in the country. The cultural diversity requirement continues today and is now the foundation of our efforts to educate all students on the importance of race and democracy. Dr. Perry retired, and you've heard a lot of this. This is the recap as we bring him up. But Dr. Perry retired in 1997 after chairing the department for almost 2 decades. He has left a continuing legacy of inclusion and empowerment that enriches the BGSU community today. It is my pleasure and my honor to welcome Dr. Robert L. Perry back to campus and to invite Dr. Perry and a member of his family to the podium to share words.
Wow. Well, I'm I'm blessed with spinal stenosis. That's one of my difficulties, but I'm still up and moving. And I tell people oftentimes I got two activities I primarily do now, mental therapy and physical therapy, which I go to every week. Mental therapy, I do what I've been accustomed to doing all my life. I read and write and argue with my kids, particularly the political scientists over there. Since I was really basically trained as a sociologist, so we have some differences, but we enjoy our conversations. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. And it's truly a humbling affair to join with the Bowling Green Falcon community today. To the Board of Trustees and President Rodney Rogers, thank you. And all the educated staff in your offices, I also thank you for your commitment to ensuring that the annals of the ethnic studies movement, which began here more than 50 years ago, and that is continued to be celebrated and archived for a new generation of brilliant thinkers. We need only to, I think, point to the continuing attacks and ethnic and racial identity and the lived experiences of marginalized groups, generally to know how critically important it is to honor the work begun by BG, Black student activists, in the 1960s. Just like students then demanded that this institution offer courses where they could learn about non-white history, culture, and politics, it is so very inspiring to witness the same zeal and fervor for inclusion among students today. Over the past several years, our country faced many tests of what I was once quoted in the 1970s, I think, in the BG News as a test of the white system. To be clear, racism is alive and well today. The attacks on local school boards nationwide, on critical race theory that permeate the news today should prove to everyone here today why the Department of Ethnic Studies must forever remain a beacon of higher learning about global, local, and marginalized cultures. We live in a dynamic time, a time not unlike what it was like on this campus when I first arrived in the 1950s, or when my friends, colleagues like Dr. John Scott, Dr. Ernest Champion, who's now deceased, and others were working together in the early 70s to develop curriculum that was not centered in white Western European culture. It was not easy to create a new curriculum that focused on the very groups which society sought to ignore here in rural Northwest Ohio during the decade that birthed affirmative action. However, we did it together. I'm so proud of what we accomplished together because it began by listening to the student experience. In the immediate post-civil rights era, just a few years after the assassination of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., just a few months after the massacre at Kent State, the Orangeburg massacre at South Carolina State, and just a few years after the Detroit urban rebellions against structural injustice. By the way, that's where I began my doctorate degree at Wayne State University doing tanks being driven down Woodward Avenue. I was there then. So it was that era then that we birthed ethnic studies here at BGSU. It occurred because all of that which was going on, was the setting for what began to happen here and what emerged as, I think, a great outcome for Bowling Green State University in terms of where we are at today. What we began as a center that few expected to last more than a couple of years, as the civil rights energy was predicted to calm